I'm happy to introduce Barbara Glickman, who will be presenting her second book on regional gardens called Maryland's Public Gardens and Parks. A few months ago, I was at a friend's house, and I happened to pick up a book and started leafing through it and said, wow, this is a really nice book. I like it. And, she said to me, oh, this was written by Barbara Glickman, who's a longtime friend of mine. So it's a particular honor to be able to introduce her this morning. Barbara presented her first book here 3 years ago, and that book was called Capitol Splendor, Gardens and Parks of Washington, D.C. She likes to travel in Europe and the U.S., seeking out gardens and great places to hike and bicycle. Prior to writing her books, she worked for 20 years in hospital and healthcare administration after earning a master's in health services administration from the University of Michigan School of Public Health and an MBA in marketing from George Washington University. She'll talk to you today about her book and what inspired her in actually writing it. Welcome, Barbara.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, Jim, for such a nice introduction. And thank you all for coming out here, especially to coming to this tent to listen to my presentation on my second book. So this book covers 52 gardens and parks in the state of Maryland. My first book, Capitol Splendor, covered 32. I'm just curious, has anyone heard me talk about either of my books before? Your first time? Okay, great. In this book, I did the photography as well as the writing. So all of the photographs that you'll see up here are actually in the book. The book was published by Schiffer Publishing last June. And in the book, there's a narrative, several narratives about the history, the horticultural highlights, and then I follow it up with about 5 or 6 photos. And I always wondered how gardens got to be where they are, why they have what they have, and how they're evolving. And if you have some of those questions, too, about some of the places you visit, then hopefully this will illuminate some of those answers for you. This presentation is basically a history of Maryland through her gardens. It's a little different than the one I give to garden clubs, but I do cover about 10 historical gardens, and then at the end I go over a couple of other types like sculpture gardens, battlefields, which I love, just to add a little diversity. So what I'm going to go through, the first 25 slides show the diversity of the different gardens and parks throughout the state, and I'm just going to go through them very quickly. After that, I'm going to talk about 15 of those and then go into more detail and show you several photos from each of those. And as Jim said, after that, hopefully you'll be inspired to go out to see the gardens or else visit me in the author signing bee tent to look at the book. Okay, so I want to talk briefly about what inspired me to write my second book. I really like my adopted state of Maryland. It's called Maryland in Miniature, and that's because all types of natural terrain are here except for deserts. So you have sand dunes in the eastern shore, you have the rolling hills in the central region, which I love especially for biking, and then you have the mountains out west like in Garrett County. And all these different climates and terrains support a variety of gardens and parks, and you can visit most of them within just a few hours from any point within the state. Secondly, there are wonderful cities such as Frederick, Annapolis, and Baltimore, all with a rich culture and history, and many of those cities have wonderful historic homes and accompanying gardens, and I'll be going through many of those later. And lastly, I started going through my neighborhood in the fall of 2011 after I'd sent in the manuscript for my first book, and I was taking photos, and then I went biking up up in Frederick County. And I went to Gathland State Park, which was a first time for me, and Washington Monument State Park, where I'd been before, on a crisp afternoon, and I took a lot of photos, and that's when I decided that there were a lot of neat places in Maryland that had to be explored. And so actually, of the 52, I actually found about 20 new sites. And I'm sure if you look at the book, you too may find some new sites that are worth visiting. So let me go through some of the slides pretty quickly that show the diversity. So this is the War Correspondence Arch at Gathland State Park. It's a memorial to Civil War correspondents, and the practice of embedded journalists started during the Civil War. The Appalachian Trail goes through the park as well. It's in a very high peak, and if you're a biker, it's a really neat place if you want to go fast down from there. But it has great views. Next is the Washington Monument State Park, and you have a great view of Cumberland Valley from there. This is the opulent Silburn Arboretum in Baltimore, and it's surrounded by gardens on all sides. The spiky plant in front is a Allium sherbeti, and there's Mexican feathergrass. I assume everyone can hear me? Okay. This is the Howard Peters Rawlings Conservatory in Baltimore, and it's the second oldest conservatory in the country. The oldest one is in Golden Gate State Park in San Francisco. These are the famous tulips up in Sherwood Gardens in Baltimore. This is a view of Fort McHenry in Baltimore. And in the springtime, there are cherry trees along a walk along the river. So if you didn't want to go down to the cherry blossoms, it's another nice place to see the cherry trees. These are the azaleas at Brighton Dam Azalea Garden in Brookville, Maryland. I haven't been saying where they are. I guess I'll try to. This is a view of Little Seneca Lake. It's framed in crown vetch, and that's an invasive plant, but it's used on a lot of highways to help with erosion control. But I think it still is kind of attractive. This is the marsh at McKee Bescher's Wildlife Management Area in Poolesville, and there are you can usually find great herons and white egrets and the yellow water lily or spatterdock. Another part of the park has many fields of sunflowers that the Department of Natural Resources plants in the late summer. This is at Merkel Wildlife Sanctuary in Upper Marlboro, and it's also a good place to see herons, and there are lots of fields of hay that are grown for the migrating geese. And at Patuxent River State Park, just next door, there are large stands of wild rice that attract many birds and waterfowl, such as Sora birds. This is Cache Lake at Patuxent Research Refuge, which has nearly 13,000 acres of wetlands, meadows, and forests. This is at Oxon Hill Manor, and they have many formal gardens, and a lot of people go there to have their wedding. And this is a formal garden with peonies. At Atkins Arboretum on the Eastern Shore, they have many acres of native plants and lots of meadows there with wildflowers. Here's an egret in the tidal marsh at Blackwater National Wildlife Refuge, and some of the common plants there are millet and cordgrass, and the refuge is also known for having lots of bald eagles. This is Chapman State Park in Indian Head, and you can see large swaths of prickly pear cactus in the meadows looking up, and prickly pear cactus is actually native to Maryland. Battle Creek Cypress Swamp in Prince Frederick has one of the northernmost stands of bald cypress trees in the United States. Helen Avalon Taw's Garden is a 5-acre garden in Annapolis, and it has a Maryland in miniature theme, so all 3 regions are represented there through its gardens. McCrillis Gardens, which is part of Brookside, is known for its azaleas, but it has many other perennials such as bleeding hearts. Sugarloaf Mountain is on the border of Montgomery and Frederick counties, and it's actually a monadnock. It's not a mountain as it remained after the surrounding area was eroded. Here the birds are attracted to the bird feeders at the Audubon Naturalist Society. This is a view of Great Falls from the Maryland side. And I'm coming to the end of the photos I'm going through quickly. This is the Schwartz Peony Garden at Seneca Creek State Park. It's a 1-acre, well-tended display garden, and next to it are about 4 acres of peonies that are not as well tended. And I want to take a minute and talk about this garden, because where you're sitting right now probably would have been covered in peonies. There was about 100 years ago, there was a Washington realtor and avid gardener by the name of Edward Schwartz, and he raised 40,000 peonies representing 400 types of peonies on a 5-acre garden right here. And so people from those trains would look out and see all the peonies. And he actually lived in the building that's now the City Hall. So his heirs sold the property, and they bought 18 acres near where Seneca Creek State Park is, and they planted 35,000 of those peonies, representing over 200 types. And so then the state bought the land to make Seneca Creek State Park, and that's why there are all these peonies there. Has anyone seen the peonies there? Oh, were they out? Okay. Yeah, I was going to say now's a very good time to go see them. When I was writing the book, I heard about it. I'd been to Seneca Creek many times to go kayaking, hiking, cross-country skiing, the playground. But when you go in, I usually make a right at the stop sign. But if you go left, I think it says maintenance only. But this time of year, you're allowed to go see the peonies, and so it's kind of a neat little find if you're used to going up there. So, and lastly, before I get into the heart of my discussion, I'm going to also show you one more picture of Seneca Creek State Park, because I usually like to show animals or amphibians, and my dog Winston got to go with me to this park. Many years ago, dogs were not allowed, and they're allowed sometimes now, so it's nice to know. So the next garden I'm going to talk about is Ladue Topiary Gardens in Moncton, Maryland, in Harford County. I normally talk about this garden in my first book, but the 7 gardens that are in my first book are in this book, and it's a little out of order chronologically, but I wanted to make sure you all heard about this garden because it's very unique. This garden was named one of the top 5 gardens by the Canadian Tourism Council in 2012 in North America. And the same year, Architectural Digest named it one of the top 10 topiary gardens in the world. The man who started the garden was a transplanted New Yorker who came to Maryland and bought the 250-acre Pleasant Valley farm. He grew up in New York. He came from a prominent New York family, and they used to take him to Europe. And so from his many trips to Europe, he knew the style of gardens. So he was going to build 2 long axes, and off of these, he was going to have 22 garden rooms. He also liked to go fox hunting, and so he would go fox hunting in England, and New York was becoming too crowded for him to pursue his love of fox hunting on Long Island, and that's why he came down here. So from his he saw a topiary similar to this in England, and he had the wire structures sent here. He learned the art of topiary, and he added the horse and rider because he had not seen that over in England. Let me see. The kind of trees used for topiary are yew, privet, boxwood, ivy, and hemlock. And topiary gardens were prominent from the Roman times until the 1800s, and then they fell out of favor. In the center of his large lawn, or the Great Bowl, he had a large swimming pool. But now there's a fountain, and there are summer concerts there on Sunday evenings. There are about 22 different garden rooms. A garden room is a separate garden area based on a type of plant or a color. There are also still about, the entire 250 acres is there, but most of it's woodland for trails. He was a very colorful personality, and he became friends with people such as Noel Coward, Clark Gable, the Duke and Duchess of Windsor, Charlie Chaplin, and if you go up there, you should allow enough time to take a tour of the house. And the lunch there, it's kind of like eating in a European stone patio. So let me go through some pictures. This is the famous, the iconic picture you'll see when you first come on the grounds and the visitor centers nearby. This is the Chinese junk topiary at the bottom of the iris garden. This is a view of the large topiary sculpture garden. And you can see Winston Churchill's top hat and a lyre bird. This is the croquet court with irises and tulips, and it was formerly a tennis court. And this is the terrace garden, and it features hemlock trees that were shaped into garlands, windows, and obelisks. Has anyone been up to Ladue? Okay. The next site I'm going to talk about is historic London Town and Gardens. It's located on 23 acres in Edgewater, not too far from Annapolis, along the South River. London Town was an important tobacco port that reached its peak in the 1720s. But after the Revolutionary War, Baltimore and Annapolis prospered, and so people just left London Town. There's one remaining building from that time called the William Brown House, and it was built in 1760. They are trying to do archaeological excavations to find out what other structures might have looked like. Then there are some recreated structures there. The park began in the 1960s as a cooperative effort among county officials, garden clubs, and the University of Maryland. There are three main garden areas. There's an 8-acre woodland garden, the ornamental gardens, and the historic gardens, and it's still evolving. The woodland garden has many garden rooms with collections of azaleas, holly trees, and camellias. There are over 200 types of camellias there, thanks to a project by Dr. William Ackerman of the U.S. National Arboretum. Back in the late 1970s, there were very many cold days and nights, and nearly all of the 1,000 camellias at the National Arboretum died. And so Dr. William Ackerman was able to breed cold hybrid winter, spring, and summer camellias. I was told by the naturalist there that they actually planted them by the South River so that they would actually be exposed to those extra frigid winds coming off the river. So. The ornamental garden is noted for its peony collection, so again, now would be a great time to go visit it. And there's a long succession of flowers after that with roses, daylilies, hydrangeas, and a Japanese flowering apricot tree in late winter. And the historic gardens feature both a colonial kitchen garden and an African-American garden. And so there are herbs and vegetables, and the African-American garden features peppers, sorghum, and tobacco. And again, like in most of these places I'm talking about, you can visit both the houses that are there and the gardens. So this shows you the peonies with the South River in the background. That's the colonial garden with one of the recreated houses in the back, and you can see some of the vegetables such as the red vein Swiss chard, the collards, and the fennel. And this is the original William Brown house. It was used as a tavern for people coming across the river by ferry. The next place I'm going to talk about is Soderley Plantation. And this was another new site for me. It's down in St. Mary's County. Has anyone been there? Oh, a bunch? Okay. I was actually right near there Mother's Day. I went hiking at Greenwell State Park, which is in that same part of the country or state. Soderley Plantation sits on 95 bucolic acres overlooking the Patuxent River, and it has beautiful gardens, acres of rolling meadows, and shoreline. And it also has a tidewater plantation. The plantation was started in 1703, and there are many outbuildings as well. The person who first lived there, James Bowles, was a lumber and tobacco trader, and he purchased 2,000 acres in 1699, and he built a two-room house. One of the next persons that lived there had 7,000 acres there and over 90 slaves. But in the early 1900s, a man by the name of Herbert Satterley and his wife, the daughter of J.P. Morgan, moved into the 1,000-acre estate. And it was they who built the colonial revival garden that you see today, the planting, the cutting garden, the perennial garden. They put the sundial in, and many of the other features. Their daughter also added to the garden by putting in more bulbs and roses, and she opened the house and gardens up to the public in 1961. It became a National Historic Landmark in 2000. There's also a small children's garden that has miniature trees that are now 20 years old. So if you go in May, like I did just around this time several years ago, you can see this beautiful view overlooking the Patuxent River, and you'll see the red poppies and the purple irises. And if you go back 2 months later, like I did on a hot July day, you'll see the same view with phlox and lilies. This formal garden here has yew topiary and a restored 19th century sundial. Soderley is known for its long row of peonies. They just seem to go on forever along the brick wall. And here you can see the plantation house and the culinary herb garden. And it's a very neat tour of the house if you go there. Okay. The next place I'm going to talk about is Mount Harmon Plantation in Cecil County. Has anyone been up there? No one, okay. Cecil County is the county just south of Delaware. It's not the furthest place I'd been to. But this plantation was started when the second Lord Baltimore gave a land grant of 350 acres to Godfrey Harmon in 1651. And a tobacco plantation flourished there for the next 200 years. This lovely Georgian house was built in 1730, and the 200 acres of grounds are surrounded by water on all three sides. On early maps, the peninsula that was formed by all the creeks and inlets of the Sassafras River was called World's End. And if you drive up there, you will kind of realize why it's called World's End. It's pretty desolate and out of the way, but it's a nice place to go to. The house is listed on the National Register of Historic Places. The property is mostly known for its preponderance of American lotus blooms. And the peak time for those is early August, and there's a festival the first weekend in August to see the blooms. But there are many acres with woodland, ponds, lots of meadows with tons of butterflies, and gardens. Near the house is a sunken garden that has a boxwood garden with a fountain and brick serpentine walls, and you can see McGill Creek beyond it with a carpet of lotus blooms. And also near the house are two 200-year-old English yew trees, an herb garden, a tobacco garden. And again, I'd advise you to go up and make sure you tour the house as well. So here's the formal boxwood garden, and you can see McGill Creek in the background. Here's a photo of the lush woods which contrasts with the many meadows and open lawns. And here, the mimosa trees were in bloom. This was the end of July, and the lotuses were just about to come out, but the mimosas were in bloom then. Next, I'm going to talk about Hampton National Historic Site. It's in Towson, and it was one of my new favorite finds in doing the book. Has anyone been there? Okay. It sits on just 63 acres now, but at its peak, the estate was 1/4 the size of present-day Baltimore. My tour guide told me that the house was the largest in the country at the time, but he wasn't 100% sure. But it's a really neat house to tour as well. The property was designated a National Historic Site in 1948, and in fact it was the very first designated historic site because of the architectural significance of the house. 7 generations of the Ridgely family lived there from the mid-1700s to the mid-1900s. And the Ridgely businesses included many things. It included ironworks, supplying arms and ammunitions during the Revolutionary War, ship ownership and the transport of iron and cash agriculture to England and coming back with cash crops and manufactured goods, and the breeding of cattle, pigs, and horses. And it was the breeding of horses that allowed Maryland's horse racing industry to flourish in the early 1900s. And it also allowed the city of Baltimore to prosper as it has. The Georgian Mansion House was started in 1783, and as I said, it was one of the largest in the country at the time. The second owner of the house, Charles Carnan Ridgely, was a Maryland governor, and it was he who laid out the terrace gardens that you see today, the terrace falling gardens. Most European gardens include steps that go from one level to another, but here there are grassy ramps, and that was more common in the mid-Atlantic states. The parterres were even admired back in the 19th century. The National Park Service, which manages it and provides the tour, and I believe it's even free, they've restored the falling gardens to its mid-19th century design using heirloom plants such as boxwood, spirea, and annuals. There's a very large cedar of Lebanon tree in the center of the lawn, and it's thought that Eliza Ridgely brought it back in the 1840s. She was very interested in horticulture. She planted many other exotic trees there that she'd brought back from her many trips to Europe and the Orient. She had planted an empress tree and a ginkgo, and she had one of the largest citrus collections that was housed in her orangery. Also on the upper level are 2 catalpas dating from 1774, and there's a rare weeping Japanese pagoda tree at the end of the lower terrace. So this is the cedar of Lebanon tree that's on the lawn, and it just started, as I said, as a little seedling. This is one of the parterres, and it has red wax begonias and yellow lantana. There are 4 parterres there, and the National Park Service had restored 2 of them. Their plan was to restore all 4, but I have not been back there to know if that's happened. And you can see the weeping Japanese pagoda tree in the background. And here the pathway separating the great terrace from the falling gardens is lined with red cedar trees. Next, I'm going to talk about the William Paca House garden and house in Annapolis, and it's a National Historic Landmark, and the garden is just 2 acres in size. It's a recreation of Paca's pre-revolutionary garden, and he was a signer of the Declaration of Independence and the governor of Maryland. The house was built between 1763 and 5, and he designed the gardens, which featured both formal and informal garden designs that were popular in England at that time. There's a lot of history associated with the gardens and the house, but in the early 1900s, the plan was to build a hotel there, and actually the gardens were paved over to build a parking lot. And so the recreated gardens opened to the public in 1973 after extensive archaeological excavations. They even used a photo of William Paca standing in his garden to help with that recreation. The garden is basically divided into two sections. There are formal sections closest to the house, which is common, and more informal ones in the back. And so the terraces closest to the house feature boxwoods, roses, flowers common in Paca's time, such as asters and lilies, and hollies pruned into conical shapes. And the next terrace has fruit trees that are cordoned, such as apple and plum trees. And then there's called the wilderness in the back, and it has different types of trees, such as pawpaw and cypress trees and fringe trees, and a 2-story summer house. So this is the view of the 2-acre garden looking from the house to the back, and you can see the formal layout. This is the view looking back towards the house, and you can make out the pond in the back is in the shape of a fish. And this is one of the 4 parterres, and it's divided into 8 geometric beds, and the Naval Academy Chapel is in the background. Next, I'm going to talk about Montpelier Mansion in Laurel, and it's one of the best examples of 18th century Georgian architecture. It's a National Historic Landmark, and it's owned and operated by the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And construction of this house began in 1781 by prominent Marylanders, Major Thomas Snowden and his wife, Anne Ridgely. There are a lot of Ridgeleys that make up the history of Maryland. And it was built originally on 9,000 acres, and now the property is just 70 acres. It's said that George Washington was one of the many notable people that visited and took back some boxwood snippets to plant at Mount Vernon. There are old 200-year-old boxwood hedges that are along the perimeter of the lawn, and there's a large 180-year-old Osage orange tree. My favorite part of the garden is this little colonial revival garden, and at one end there are economic or practical flowers such as false indigo, which is used for dyeing, and roses that were used to make rose water that was used for baking. At the other end are herbs such as lavender and thyme, and inside are ornamental flowers such as roses. Okay, this is a 70-year-old one-of-a-kind dogwood tree that has a triple blossom with 12 petals per flower instead of the usual 4. And the tree is near the carriage house entrance to the house, and it usually blooms in mid to late April. And the last photo here is the 18th century summer house that's beyond the brick path lined with boxwood and hydrangea. Next is another one of my favorite houses that I found. It was one of the first ones because I have tulips, so I had to get there very early in the season. It's in the town of Riverdale Park, and it's a National Historic Landmark that sits on just 8 acres. It was formerly a 2,000-acre estate, and there's a wonderful book if you want to read more about it. It's called Mistress of Riversdale, The Plantation Letters of Rosalie Steer Calvert. And through correspondence, you hear about the growth of Maryland in the early 1800s, because her family originally came here from Belgium to escape the French Republican armies. But then they went back, and she stayed here because she married George Calvert. And her family bought 700 acres near the port and spa town of Bladensburg. And they started the house in 1801. One of Rosalie's sons, Charles Benedict Calvert, was interested in agricultural education, and it was he who started the University of Maryland. There was an article a couple of weeks ago in the Washington Post about Riverdale because her family was aristocrats, and they had a flea, and they brought all of their artwork. And so at one time, they had all of these masterpieces in their house, and they opened it up one time to the public. But at this time, there was no such thing as the National Gallery of Art or whatever. This family was the only one that had all of these European masterpieces. Now they have a couple of reproductions in the house. Most of the flowers, fruits, and vegetables grown by Rosalie are grown today. So there are tulips in the front that are a tribute to the bulbs that were sent by her parents when they moved back. Tobacco and cotton are grown for demonstration purposes, and there are orchards of fruit trees such as cherry, plum, and fig that are representative of the orchards that were grown during her time. Decorative gardening was popular at the time, and so there's a rose garden that Rosalie might have fancied. And when I was there in late summer, the kitchen garden had many interesting and colorful plants, such as the cardoon, which is an artichoke thistle, and Swiss chard. On select nights in the summer, there are concerts as well. So here you can see the house and the tulip garden. And even back then, the deer ate the tulips. So. Here you can see the redbud trees and the flowers and the heart-shaped leaves that those beautiful flowers so quickly change into. The cotton blossom is just a demonstration crop and is representative of the cotton that Mrs. Calvert used to make cloth for her servants. Okay, I'm going to try to go a little faster to get through some of this. The next one is Glenview Mansion in Rockville. It's listed on the National Register of Historic Places because of the significance of the architecture and gardens of the 1926 mansion. The core of the current house was started in 1838 by the Bowie family, and at the time, this county had many thriving mills. There's Muncaster Mill and Veers Mill, and corn, wheat, and barley contributed to Rockville's economy at the time. It was the Bowie family, though, that made this into a 25,000-foot house, and they added many of the garden features that you see today. There's a bowling green, there's a stone walkway, there are many parterres. There's a long curved entrance that is lined with beautiful cherry trees in the spring. And the city of Rockville put those in the 1960s. There are many parterres in the back, and there's a peony garden that's it's representative of a friendship garden with China, and there's a boxwood and rose garden that celebrates Rockville's friendship with the town in China, in Germany. Let me see. So this is one of the formal terrace gardens in the back of the house, created from steps and balustrades. Just in terms of other things, there is a very neat vintage car show at the end of October in the lower lawn at the bottom, and there are also art exhibits in the house throughout the year. This is the entrance to the house that's lined with cherry trees. And this is the garden's main corridor, which is a stone walkway lined with stone arches, and there are several garden rooms off of it. Evergreen, I have two more historical gardens. Evergreen Museum and Library is up in Baltimore, and it's a wonderful example of an Italianate mansion from the Gilded Age. They occupy just 26 acres north of downtown Baltimore, and the house was built in 1857, and 2 generations of the Garrett family lived there, and then they bequeathed the house and gardens to Johns Hopkins University in 1942. The famous landscape architect Frederick Law Olmsted helped design the front of the gardens because he liked naturalistic landscape. And so it's a very pastoral, asymmetrical look with tall, mature trees in the front of the gardens. Then formal garden design became popular in the 1900s, and so the gardens switched to reflect that style. And so in the back you see more of a formal garden look. But they've changed still because at one time they had large conservatories to house their large palm trees that they had sent back from Europe. The house is also very interesting to explore because there's a lot of famous artwork inside by painters such as Degas and Picasso. So here's the formal Italian-style garden featuring a terrace, grotto, and statuary. This is a view of the house, and you can see more the naturalistic front lawn with mature trees. And in the formal garden here, looking back to the house, you can see where the grotto was built into the brick wall. It's now been covered in, so it's not a true grotto, and the statuary in the boxwood. And the last historic house I'll be talking about is Silburn Arboretum in Baltimore, and it has 207 acres, and it has many different garden rooms and areas, display gardens. There's a unique-looking Victorian house that was built by Jesse Tyson, who was the president of Baltimore Chrome Works and was built in the mid-1860s. But in the 1950s, the city of Baltimore decided to make it into a park. There are many different garden areas. As I said, there's a large dahlia garden, several rose gardens, many perennial gardens, and 2.5 miles of woodland trails. So here's one of the formal garden areas where there are 2 Lady Baltimore statues that used to sit across the bridge. And you can see weeping Higgin cherry trees in the background. This is the Worthley garden, which is near the front of the house, and it has waving Shirley poppies and Mexican feathergrass. And another part, this garden has a type of lavender called Spanish lavender, and it has pineapple-shaped tufts that look like rabbit ears. And this is another formal garden with knockout roses. Okay, now I'm going to talk about a couple of other gardens that aren't historical, just ones that I liked and I found, and they show the diversity. This is White Island Natural Resources Management Area, and there are many different trails there. Let me just look at the time. Okay, so I want to allow a few minutes for questions. So I'll just basically go over the photos instead of talking about it too much. The Scenic Cove is at the end of the Ferry Landing Trail, and the Ferry Landing Trail, as you see, is covered with, it has Osage orange trees above it the entire way. And Osage orange trees, the wood is very soft and can be bent, and so it was used by Native Americans to make bows. And it was also used by American farmers to make hedges and fence posts. And this is a holly tree in a different part that's 300 years old. At the other end of the state, in Garrett County, is Cranesville Swamp, which is owned and managed by the Nature Conservancy. And the property was one of the first national natural landmarks designated by the National Park Service in 1965. And it's one of the few boreal bogs remaining in the southern United States. Oops. Oh, sorry. It has several carnivorous plants there. That's the sundew, and it has a larger pitcher plant. There's a 1,500-foot boardwalk, and you can see eastern larch or tamarack trees. And here are more plants in the swamp, and the orange plant is haircap moss. I'm just going to go through some of the pictures quickly. So if I only have 2 or 3 minutes left, does that allow time for questions or the total? 8 minutes? Oh, okay. Okay. I thought it was 2 minutes to, okay. I can slow it down a bit. Brookside Gardens, as you know, is in Wheaton. It's a 54-acre display garden, so that means that people can go there and see what might work well in their gardens. And I'm sure most people have been there, and you go there almost every week, and you see different types of new things that would work well. This is one of my favorite areas, and it's near the gazebo. It shows the Choctaw crepe myrtle trees that have that beautiful cinnamon and gray bark, and they're Japanese irises that grow along the banks. Here, they always have beautiful tulip trees, and in the back are river birch trees with that peeling bark. This is the aquatic garden, and I usually go see tadpoles and frogs and turtles there. I used to go with my kids, but I was lucky I saw a heron hunting here that day, and he actually did catch the fish. The wisteria is wonderful there. And here's a damask horse chestnut tree that has beautiful pink springtime blossoms. There are 2 sculpture gardens that I visited. I'll make it quick. This is Anne Marie Sculpture Garden down in Solomons. And it's a member of the Smithsonian Institution Affiliations Program, so it borrows sculpture from the Hirshhorn. And a lot of the trees throughout are loblolly pine and tulip poplar trees. This is the sculpture that you see when you first come on the property. It's called A Tribute to the Oyster Tonger. There was a Washington, D.C. architect and builder, Francis Koenig, who liked to travel to Europe, and he saw sculpture gardens there, and he was also liked the people that worked in the water around there, so that's why this sculpture is there. It's and this other sculpture is among lily of the valley plants. Then up in Baltimore, there's the Baltimore Sculpture Garden at the Museum of Art. There are 2 separate sculpture gardens there. This sculpture is called Fruit. It's set among Boston ivy and near a dwarf cut leaf maple tree. And then this is Auguste Rodin's Nude Honoré de Balzac, and it's set among a lot of different white types of flowers as a black hawk, viburnum, and white azaleas. And lastly, I like to go visit the battlefields. There's great biking and hiking up there. And Antietam also has they're trying to restore a lot of it to the way it used to look, but there are also a lot of cornfields or fields planted with soybeans. And they also have many fields planted with milkweed. So if you go there on a couple of right days in the fall, you'll see thousands of monarch butterflies on their way, which I did one time. So quickly, this is the last group of pictures. This is the famous Sunken Road. That's an eastern sycamore tree that's at the north end of Burnside Bridge, and it's a witness tree, so it was there during the Civil War. This is just one of the many views up there. And at Monocacy Battlefield, it's a great place to see Virginia bluebells. And this is my last photo. It's just a view of the battlefield. And that's my last page. Hopefully I've made it. Thank you very much, and I hope you have some questions. Been a great audience.
Can I just, so we have time for just a couple of questions because we do have another speaker coming. Does anyone have any questions? But I want to take a mic around because we are being recorded. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
One other thing, I should say I'm going to be selling my own books at Author Signing B somewhere out there. So not at the Politics and Prose tent. So and I have both of my books for sale, The Capital Splendor and my second book.
You have the books?
Yeah, I have them physically here. Yes.
Excuse me. Could you? I'm sorry, miss.
What is the name of the park that contains the Osage trees?
Y River Management Area.
So it's on the Y River on the eastern shore?
Yes, it's not too far over.
Are you allowed to hike in there?
Yes, in fact, I hiked on the first day of the hunting season. Not by choice, but that's...
I think I would do another.
Y Island.
Island.
W-Y-E, yes. And I think you can also bring a kayak and go around there. There are 30 acres of shoreline, and the state purchased the property to prevent development. But it's a natural resource area, so they plant fields. But there are hunters there in the fall.
Any other questions?
Where's the book going to be for sale?
Any other
where-
questions for the author? I can answer your question. Where's the book for sale? I'll answer that. Hold on. Any other questions for the author? Okay.
What initially sparked your interest in gardens?
As I say in the front of my book, I grew up in the 50s, and we didn't go to too many places, so I would just go out in the backyard and dig in the soil. And actually, the smell of soil is it's just in me. My parents would take me on Sunday rides into the countryside. I grew up in New York, and there wasn't too much countryside. But then when I started, it's funny, even my grandparents lived in New York City, and I went to visit a couple of weeks ago, and they had a courtyard, and inside is a fountain. And some of these images must have just taken hold on me. But I always also like to find and explore new natural areas. I mean, it's like a highlight for me. So, I mean, like Wye River was just a great place. I've gone back there. I mean, I found Gathland biking. I mean, I bike up there now. So, thank you.